out of some other suggestions. So I spent some time this morning preparing this topic, evaluating one's standing and absorption in Krishna consciousness. So I have something. Thanks. For at least one person here is a little bit newer than the rest of us, right? Okay. So here's a little picture of what this time together is going to look like. What I decided to do was start with some of our acharyas and what they say, and then some practical application of things that they say. And how do we evaluate how we're doing about what they say, about the bhakti process or Krishna consciousness. So we're accustomed to saying Krishna consciousness because Prabhupada gave that term, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. But the term Krishna consciousness refers to, of the different yoga systems, the bhakti yoga system. And the bhakti yoga system was widely made available in this age by Lord Chaitanya and his associates. And chief amongst those associates for describing the bhakti process was Rupa Goswami. So next. There's a little picture of Rupa Goswami, and he wrote many books under the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to write, according to the descriptions that he had given and other associates had given him on the bhakti process. And his chief work, next, was known as Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So Sindhu, means ocean. And the spiritual world is an ocean of bhakti rasa. And that bhakti rasa is very sweet or nectarian. So put it all together, it's bhakti rasa, amrita sindhu. That's the spiritual world. It's made up of waves, as oceans have waves. And the waves are different waves of bhakti rasa. And waves move. So bhakti rasa, it's very fluid. And it moves the hearts of those who reside in the spiritual world as they engage in service, bhakti, devotional service with love to Krishna. So this is just a definition of what bhakti is. We're going to speak about how do you evaluate, what is it we're evaluating. We're evaluating bhakti. And here's the definition next. Very short. This major work of Rupa Goswami is resting on this one verse. That means it's an important verse. There's two parts. It's what bhakti isn't, and then there's the other part is what bhakti is. It's very simple. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhya navritam. I'll summarize and then we'll read the translation. Anya. Now, each one of these references could take an hour to go into it deeply, and it still wouldn't be done. So I'm not going to go into it deeply because we don't have 6 hours. But I'm going to touch on it, and it'll invite you to go further with your reading of Prabhupada's books and discussion groups, and however you are assimilating the bhakti process. Anya abhilash shunyam. Abhilash means desire. Anya means other. Anya abhilash shunya means zippo, zero. Other desires should be zero. Which are the other desires? Jnana and karma, anavritam. Dismiss them. Anya abhilash shunyam jnana karma janavritam, because one way of analyzing what the Vedas are made up of, there's karma kanda, jnana kanda, and upasana kanda. So knowledge, trying to achieve the goal of life through cultivation of knowledge or detached work, that as a goal is anavritam, or other desires, shunya. So that's the negation. And then the positive, anukulyena krishnanu shilanam, bhaktir uttama. Bhakti is uttama. And topmost bhakti has these characteristics. It's shilanam, or behavior, or conduct, where Krishna is to be pleased, anukulyena. Krishna, anu, shilanam. That's the description of bhakti, a definition, a very powerful, all-encompassing definition. Here's the English translation. The highest bhakti is defined as continuous service or emotions directed towards Krishna. Oh, you got to move it. The highest bhakti is defined as continuous service or emotions directed towards Krishna, his expansion, forms, or others related to him with a pleasing attitude towards Krishna. That's what it is. There's what it isn't. It should be devoid of desires, abhilash, other than the desire to please the Lord, and unobstructed by impersonal gyan, materialistic rituals of karma, or other unfavorable acts. A little embellished, but that's a translation of this definition of bhakti. So the topic is to evaluate how we're doing in the bhakti process. And here's some standards to go by. A very important standard, the most important standard, is an attitude that's to please Krishna. It's service, it's activity, and behind the activity is the please Krishna attitude. Krishna should be pleased. So here's another graphic, next, that shows the same thing. As you see on the left, there's a whole bunch of hearts. So the question is, what's at the heart of bhakti? And you see there's multiple hearts on the right side of the screen. And down at the very bottom of the central heart, maybe you look closely, there's a little super soul. Paramatma, Krishna's in the heart. So what's at the heart of bhakti? There's different heart circles. We'll go to the next one. Anushilanam, that's the activities, what the body does, you can say. There's processes of bhakti. Next. And then there's the object is defined or identified. That's Krishna. But at the very heart, Krishna is the object of bhakti, and there's 9 processes of bhakti. But right at the center is anukulyena. That's the heart of bhakti. The intent to please Krishna. I'll say it in reverse. The intent to please Krishna is the heart of bhakti. So that's what bhakti is, where the heart does what the body does, and then Krishna is the object of everything, all aspects of life, morning till night, from beginning until the end of life. The heart oriented towards the intent to please Krishna. Now that's been obscured by the illusory energy. You know, the standard word that we use in ISKCON is Maya, But, it's illusory energy. And so based upon the illusory energy, we don't see Krishna. We see the illusory energy. And do I like it or don't like it? And what brings me happiness and what brings me distress? And we get involved in the illusory energy. And as a result, Krishna is obscured. So the bhakti process is to remove the forgetfulness of Krishna, the ignorance of Krishna, ignoring of Krishna, and turn attention again to Krishna. So this is now how we're going to evaluate how we're doing in that bhakti process, or the process of Krishna consciousness. So now I'm going to make reference to another one of the chronologically later acharyas. Next. His name is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. You'll see his image, a little drawing up in the upper right corner. And he wrote a book. One of his many books was describing the bhakti process in its different stages of unfolding. And one of the stages of the bhakti process is an unsteady stage. Some, but kind of off and on, the sine curve. And they're characteristic stages of that unsteady. They're sequential. It's not like a bucket and you move from this bucket to that, but it's an unfolding stage of bhakti where it's in the category of unsteady. So he gives a list of several characteristics. Let's go to the next one. It starts with, very common in the beginning stage of bhakti, the practitioner of bhakti has some burst of enthusiasm. Utsaha. Mayi. Utsaha means enthusiasm. And Mayi means kind of a false enthusiasm. A sudden burst of enthusiasm. I was hearing Bhakti Chaitanya Swami describe this one time. It was a nice, funny story. He said one time George Harrison was visiting the Bhaktivedanta Manor. And when he came to visit, because he donated the building and the property. And when he came to see how the devotees were using the property that he donated, there was kind of like a reception for him as he drove in the long driveway. And so one young brahmachari saw George Harrison step out of the limousine, and he paid his full dandavats, obeisances, in front of George Harrison in a big puddle, because in London it rains a lot. And he paid his full obeisances in the puddle. And he stood up and his dhoti was dripping with mud. And George said, "You didn't have to do that." Utsahamayi. I mean, it was a nice gesture, but not like he did that for the rest of his life. Then following that is Ganatarala, which means intermittent, sometimes enthusiastic, sometimes not so enthusiastic, in fact, sometimes even lethargic. These are sequential. And supposing one moved from that Ganatarala stage, the next one, this is Vishwanath's analysis, a stage where doubts assail one's resolve. Vyudha vikalpa, vacillating back and forth between this and that, a stage of doubting. And the author, Vishwanath, gives this classic example. At least for some young men, it's a classic example. Should I get married or should I be a householder? Those that have been around for a while know what that stage is like for a young man. Some people it's not a question, but some people it's a question, and they're on the fence. And they look on this side, and look on that side, look on this side. So it's very funny how he describes it. They're leaning way over this way, and then they're leaning way over that way. Vyudha vikalpa, it's an example. Doubt about one's resolve on the bhakti path and how to do it and how to move. That's a stage of unsteadiness. Next, Vishaya Sangara. Vishaya means indulging the senses, sense enjoyment, Vishaya. And there's a resolve, I want to do away with this particular sense enjoyment, but it's kind of unsteady. The resolve is unsteady. And sometimes the sense enjoyment side wins and sometimes the resolve wins. But specifically about a tug of war with sense enjoyment. Next, Niyamakshama. Niyama is do nots. It's kind of like if one is do, and this is a do not side. That I know that there are things that if I did without, it would be good for me. And I deliberate on it carefully, read scriptures, I inquire from learned persons. It's clear that it would help me if I did without such and such. But the resolve is not strong. So one is drawn to, the other is doing without. They're related. Akshama, not doing full justice with the bhakti process, although practice is going on, in a regular way practice is going on, but progress isn't what it could be, should be. It's a stage of unsteadiness. And the final one he lists, Taranga Rangani. And there's a tendency when bhakti becomes a little more stable and steady, then persons offer praise or position or some kind of distinction or honor or something like that. And it's called Rangani. It's a little wave. A little wave. The meaning, my understanding, there are probably other understandings, but like one of the most celebrated deities in India is Ranganath. Yes? And the meaning, my understanding of the meaning, is he's the nath of the waves. Ranganath. He's in the milk ocean or the causal ocean, or Lord Narayana or Lord Vishnu that's on the waves. He's Ranganath, and Rangani is diminutive. Little waves. Little waves of something that's done nicely in bhakti, and something comes back. Oh, you've done so nicely. Da, 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 da. You cooked a nice feast. You had a nice festival. Oh, you're such a nice devotee, and something, something. You sang a nice kirtan. And so here comes some recognition and enjoying for oneself that recognition. That's a category of unsteadiness in bhakti. So one needs to graduate through those successive unsteady sections. In the same book, it's a really nice book if you want to, at some point in time, understand the stages of bhakti better, so you can evaluate how you're doing. And it's good if you have somebody guiding you so they can also help evaluate how you're doing. But there's some actual criterion, external criterion, by which one can evaluate how you're progressing. There's a whole other section that then describes anarthas. You heard that term before, anartha? You know what artha means? Not the little boy, but the young man behind you. What's your name? Subham. Subham. You know what artha means? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Artha commonly means wealth. Dharma is done for many people. They do dharma because they get artha. And when they get artha, they do kama. They enjoy the fruits of that artha. And then moksha. You've heard that before. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. No. Okay. So artha means something, commonly taken to mean economic development, but more literally it means something wanted. And you put the negative in front, anartha is something unwanted. So there's things that are unwanted that may cloud the heart. So even when you're doing bhakti, the fullness of bhakti isn't experienced. Like clouds in the sky block the brilliance of the sun. The sun above the clouds is as brilliant as it is anywhere, but beneath the cloud, depending upon the thickness of the cloud or the intensity of the anartha, which is cloud-like, the full effect of bhakti isn't experienced. And there's different sources or causes of those anarthas. And then there's a stage of bhakti where one wants to become free from those anarthas, unwanted things in the heart. Unwanted things in the heart. So it's called anartha nivritti. Nivritti means eradication of. So that's a stage in bhakti, eradication of unwanted things in the heart. So the same author, Vishwanath, writes some obstacles when you're trying to eliminate unwanted things in the heart, or anartha nivritti. You on that page? Yeah. So we're going to go to the first one, and it's very simple. 2-syllable word, laya, means lethargy. And weakness or lethargic while hearing, chanting, and remembering in sequence. Hearing, chanting, and remembering. Laxity, indifference, even stronger is lethargy. That's an obstacle. It's an obstacle. Just a little sharing. I spent, during the 4th of July weekend, every year for some number of years, because it's a holiday. Down here you have, did you have Rath Yatra this year? No Rath Yatra. Was there a public? Nothing. Maybe next year. So while you're having Rath Yatra, I'm having a festival of the Holy Name with a number of devotees. It was really nice. This year there were almost 400 people because it was online and people weren't going to Rath Yatra. So one of the main topics was on this one, similar actually, is indifference. Indifference. Then you may be doing something, but if you're indifferent towards the object, that's Krishna, and if the heart is not oriented towards the intention of pleasing Krishna, if you're kind of like indifferent towards Krishna, that's what laya is. And it's hard to overcome the unwanted things in the heart because of that laxity or lethargy or indifference towards the object, Krishna. Next. Vikshepa. Vikshepa. Talking or thinking about mundane, this is the translation I read, nonsense, stuff, blah, blah. Prajalpa, common blah, blah stuff. While devotional activity is going on. Here's a nice teaching that I heard from devotees that were trained by Prabhupada in the kitchen. And he was really strict, like really strict. Cleanliness was one of the rules, like super cleanliness, one of the rules in the kitchen. Those of you that cook, probably some ladies do some cooking sometimes, more than sometimes. Cleanliness was super important. And the reason, because it's for Krishna. So it's got to be clean, because you're going to offer to Krishna. You can't be casual about cleanliness. And then another is a rule. either one of two things. Either you're silent, or talks about Krishna. Of course, you could hear some recordings of kirtan, etc. But casual conversation, it's not to happen when you're in the kitchen, when you're cooking for Krishna. No casual conversation. While doing devotional activities such as hearing or chanting, etc., thinking about, because it can happen even in the mind while you're doing something, the mind is on something mundane. So that's an obstacle in removing unwanted things in the heart. Next, apratipati. Now this is also the indifference topic, when both laya and vikshepa are absent, but at times one feels incapable or disinterested in hearing and chanting. That's certainly an indifference. In fact, this word apratipati is translated from Sanskrit into English in some places as indifference. In other words, bhakti means to please Krishna, and if the pleasing Krishna, the object, is not so strong, then your progress is going to be very slow. So evaluating progress, how much on the positive, how much are you very focused on and intent on pleasing Krishna, and how much on the other end of the spectrum is indifference or just disinterested, apratipati, in those activities that are going to elevate you. Next, kashaya is defined as a tendency to display such faults as anger, greed, and arrogance. That's a little darker. And then finally, rasavada means that the mind is so attached to sense pleasure, often meditating on it, that he isn't able to hear and chant with concentration. So here's a little image that shows the message. There's what apathy looks like. I mean, a rose is nice, but a cut rose that's dried up doesn't look so nice. And that's what bhakti may look like or feel like. I'll share this. Just before coming here, I was in Boston for about 8 days, and I was staying at a home with a family that has 2 girls. And one girl is like really bright, really social, really talkative, and she's the first one that's got her hand up for questions. Are you like that? Probably you're a little more subdued. She's really outgoing. And like the topic that we were discussing while at their home and, in the evening sessions was Harinam Chintamani. Similar topic, how to progress in the chanting of the holy name. And every time, first one, I find chanting boring. I find chanting boring. I mean, it's not like, it's her personality. She wants to get beyond feeling bored. But that's not what she said. It's like, I find chanting boring. It came out later. She actually doesn't like being bored. She knows that there's value. But when there's this state of apathy, then it feels boring. Or, whatever, us distracted, etc., etc., etc. So we spend some time on the topic, every single class, different ways of assisting. And the recommendation on the alternative side is, this is a measure of how one is doing in Krishna consciousness, is the enthusiasm to hear. Next, yeah, you got it? Okay. Enthusiasm to hear. Now, because in meditating upon this topic of evaluating how one is doing and progressing in Krishna consciousness, I thought of a nice set of verses next from the 7th canto Bhagavatam, and it comes right after the Prahlad Maharaj section of the Bhagavatam. The whole of the Canto 7 is being narrated by Narada Muni, who you see pictured here. And Narada Muni is having a discussion with Maharaj Yudhisthira. And the first chapter starts with, there at the Rajasuya Yagya, Krishna's there seated on the throne as the guest of honor, the most honored person in the assembly. And Yudhisthira is calling upon, I'd like to hear glorification of the most exalted person in this assembly. And Grandfather Bhishma, being the elder, stands up and he glorifies Krishna to his heart's content. And there's one person in the audience that can't stand it. Shishupal. You know Shishupal, right? Yeah. So he was trying to restrain himself, but he couldn't. He stood up and offended Krishna so badly. Bhima grabbed his club, wanted to smash him. And Krishna stopped him. Arjuna wanted to get his bow and arrow and shoot him. Krishna stopped him. And he went on and on and on, offending Krishna so badly. And the 100th time, because there was a promise without all the detail, Krishna separated the noise-making part of his body from the rest of his body with the Sudarshan chakra. And everyone was, ah. And they saw the soul of Shishupal like a dazzling light ascend into the sky, hover there for some time, merge into Krishna's body. Got liberation. So when it was over, chapter 1 of Canto 7, Yudhisthira wants to know, how is it possible? He's such a bad person. And he got liberation. How is it possible? And the answer, there's the whole chapter giving the answer, the rest of the canto is giving the answer. He was always chanting Krishna's name. He was chanting Krishna's name in scorn and derision, but he was always chanting. So Krishna's name is pure. And even those that have a bad attitude, they become purified. They don't get love of God, but they get liberation by being killed by Krishna and by being freed from the reactions of their animosity. So in the course of that whole description, that whole chapter, the story of Prahlad is narrated. Is that one of your favorite stories in the Krishna book? Not Krishna book, but the Bhagavatam? You know the story of Prahlad, right? Is he a hero for you? Yes? You're a little shy, huh? Okay, but he knows the Prahlad story, inside out. Okay. So after the Prahlad story is narrated, Yudhisthira asks, wow, Prahlad was such an exalted person. And I'm supposed to be king. That's what the Rajasuya Yagya is for. I'm going to become the king. So it's my duty to help the subjects become elevated. So can you tell me how my citizens can become elevated like that? It's a good question, right? And that's our topic, how to become elevated. So there's different things that Narada explains, but one of the things that he says is, of course, that pure devotional service is the means, but to take up pure devotional service, one has to be a proper follower of Varnashram and do your duties of life for the pleasure of Krishna. But before you can do that properly, you have to become a civilized human being. So that's what these verses 8 through 12, because the Prahlad story ends with chapter 10. And starting with chapter 11, Narada's giving general principles to be followed by all human beings. And there's 30 of them. And that's a really good way that we can evaluate how we're progressing in devotional service. There's 30 characteristics, without listing them because it's just a summary here. But we can do our own evaluation. How are we doing? How am I being successful in following the bhakti process? Are these characteristics being manifest or not? And if not, then we need to pay attention to manifesting them. But the power to manifest them for us is bhakti itself. So circling back to what Rupa Goswami's definition of what bhakti is. We strengthen bhakti, and thereby these other nice qualities can be developed. Yes? Now let me go over, put that on, press the pause button, go over here for a moment. In Hungary, ISKCON Hungary is led by Shivaram Maharaj. Some of you know Shivaram Maharaj. And he and the devotees in Hungary, not just at the farm, but the whole of Hungary, they took it very, very seriously for at least a year and a half. Probably they're still doing it, but I was very aware of what they were doing for about a year and a half. They were keen on solving a riddle that's been a riddle for ISKCON since Prabhupada's time, and that is two questions. What does Varnashram Dharma look like in ISKCON? Is it meant for ISKCON, or is it meant for those that aren't in ISKCON and we're just supposed to show a nice example? And what is it, and how to manifest it? And in case you're not aware, there's a lot of different ideas out there of what it is and how to get there. So they took a very serious, like 30 people in a think tank, kind of having discussions, researching, coming back, to come up with at least how do you get there. So they came across this section, and Shivaram Maharaj explained this to all of our leaders, that according to Narada Muni, you can't manifest Varnashram without first becoming a human being, a civilized human being. So they decided, he shared this, everyone that gave class in public classes in the temple room and wherever else they give classes, they would focus on one of those 30 qualities for something like a week or 2 weeks. All speakers speak on one quality or characteristic or principle of human existence. And by hearing about it, discussing it, absorbing themselves in it to become better human beings, and then becoming better human beings to be able to be eligible to having the adhikar to enter into Daivi Varnashram, to make them better suited for devotional service, and then pure devotional service. So it's something, I've included this slide because it's something that we can do to evaluate how we're doing. And if you're not sure how you're doing, ask someone that's close to you and is, ready to give you some honest feedback, because generally speaking, each of us have blind spots. We don't see what others see, generally speaking. And so if you have a close circle of people that you're open for honest feedback, they can say, like what Anuttama teaches in the leadership seminar, appreciation, room for improvement, appreciation. Really? Room for improvement? I didn't see that before. Are you sure? Oh yeah, I'm sure. Here are some examples. Oh, really? Because I was thinking this and you're seeing that. So if you have persons that are close, they can see you up close, and they can see appreciation as well as room for improvement, then it gives you an opportunity to become more human. I know 2 devotees that heard this explanation I just gave, and they've spent at least a year on trying to become more human, because there are areas in their life they've come to understand there's weaknesses. That's not becoming of a Vaishnava. They're not doing well in that department. So they want to become better in that department. And there's probably several of them. Something that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, do you know who is Bhaktivinoda Thakur? You know who is Prabhupada, right? You know Prabhupada's spiritual master is Bhaktisiddhanta. Bhaktisiddhanta is his spiritual master. And then his father, and in the line of disciplic succession, is Bhaktivinoda. Bhaktivinoda. We observed his disappearance date not too long ago. Lived in the latter part of the 1800s and the very beginning part of the 1900s. Bhaktivinoda. So Bhaktivinoda wrote one of his 100 books was called Amnaya Sutra. In Amnaya Sutra, he writes, retraction of bad habits. It's kind of on this. If you don't have one of those 30 qualities and it's kind of uncomfortable for you, and at least uncomfortable for others, then he has a whole description of retraction of bad habits. And part of what he says is it may take 5 years to overcome a bad habit. And if you don't spend 5 years, then you may do the unsteady, it gets better, and then you get less attentive and conditioning reverts. And it's a bad habit again. It happens. It happens. It's special when it doesn't happen, but it happens more than it doesn't happen. So stay with it and have persons to help give you feedback and give you support and strength to become more human. And that's a good barometer of evaluating how you're doing in bhakti. Now supposing, I'm going to go to the next slide, in Krishna's talks with Uddhava, he describes this where it just doesn't happen. Even you're trying and it's not happening. So here's some qualification to progress even when it's not happening. It's a nice understanding. Next. Having awakened faith in the narration of my glories, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. Do you know who is Uddhava? No. You know who is Krishna? You know who is Arjuna? Arjuna was Krishna's cousin, right? Arjuna was Krishna's cousin. Arjuna's mother and Krishna's father were brother and sister. So they were cousins. But he had another cousin. His name is Uddhava. And Uddhava was always with him. From the time that Krishna went to Mathura for the whole rest of his life, 125 years. And he went to Mathura when he was 12. So Uddhava was with him all the time. Just before Krishna's departing, he called Uddhava and gave him instructions. It's called Uddhava Gita. Like speaking to Arjuna is Bhagavad Gita. Speaking to Uddhava is called Uddhava Gita. Very, very elevated subject. This is from that section, Krishna speaking to Uddhava. So it's, when he says my glories, it's Krishna speaking to Uddhava. And he's describing eligibility for making progress. Having awakened faith in narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee remains happy and worships me with great faith and conviction. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. So that, just this morning, checking my email, in comes my inbox. There's a letter like this. Somebody I know, due to some weakness, succumbed to sense enjoyment, and they feel really bad. So I want to know what to do. So I'm referring them to this. It's not that it's okay, but it's not a surprise either. And Krishna knows. So Krishna is encouraging his devotee through encouraging Arjuna, stay faithful to the bhakti process, recognizing that weakness, the bad habit, like Bhaktivinoda calls it, retraction of bad habits, the bad habit doesn't just quickly get up and run away. But stay with it, faithful to the bhakti process, knowing that doesn't bring happiness, and it brings the opposite. It leads to a miserable result. So how do we know how we're doing? That's the question. Evaluating our progress, how we're doing in our progress in the bhakti process or in Krishna consciousness. At the bottom gives this requirement: self-honesty, no duplicity, knowledge of the goal, no complacency, means always striving to attain the goal, even if it's little by little, incrementally. Now, just doing all of that's in the bottom of this slide, maybe that's a challenge. Say always anything. But striving, I'm not there yet, but I'm striving, then that's the qualification. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. I'm not there yet. During this visit to Boston, I kept using this phrase. So, you're a card-carrying member of I'm Not There Yet Club. I know what the goal is, and I do well for a while, and then, what do I do? So, it's, you're a card-carrying member of the I'm Not There Yet Club. That's the unsteady that we gave some descriptions of. So now you continue striving for steady, even when you're not. You're not there yet, but you continue. And that faith and that continuing to strive is a barometer, a test of evaluating our progress. Just like that word enthusiasm you saw a little while ago. That's a barometer. And the other side is complacency or apathy, the wilted rose. So that's how you can see how you're doing. Then next, sometimes we just run into difficulty after difficulty after difficulty, sometimes, or more than we would like it to be. So that this is an image to show, difficulty after difficulty, row. But somehow if there's that nice little flower in the middle of a crack in the desolate, difficult times, that's an indication that you're doing all right. And the Bhagavad Gita verse that speaks about it is called Brahmabhuta. Brahmabhuta. Towards the end of chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita, Brahmabhuta stage. Brahmabhuta means, well, did you go back before you put the Brahmabhuta up? Probably most of you, if not all of you, have already seen it. If you haven't, please view it. That movie or documentary about Prabhupada that Yadavar and Vishaka made, or Vishaka and Yadavar made, or whatever way to say it. And one of the sections in that film is really, really well done. Please view it. I really like, stuck, is there's a TV studio, kind of a bland background and a big table, and the interviewer says, Swamiji, you came to this country. You must have come with some message for the people in this country. Could you share with us what is that message that you came to give to this world? Prabhupada, know yourself. There was a silence. Oh, know yourself, Prabhupada. Know yourself. I mean, you can unpack that and it means a lot. So to know yourself is Brahmabhuta. I mean, it includes knowing who you're not, and then it includes knowing who you are. And knowing who you are includes knowing who you are in relation to the source of everything, and knowing your relationship, and et cetera, et cetera. Unpack, know yourself, and it's, the whole picture of Krishna consciousness. But when it's Brahmabhuta, in this verse, the way that our acharyas described this verse, now we'll go to the verse, a symptom, how we can evaluate how we're doing, is prasanatma. That even when there's a hard time hits real hard, life throws a rock at you and it hurts. And then here comes another rock, and here comes another rock, and it hurts, and it hurts, and it hurts. But if there's steadiness because of knowing who you are, then prasanatma, you're happy and steady despite, whatever's going on. And na sochati, na kangsati, neither hankering or lamenting. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu, this is a symptom, seeing others with equal vision, treating others with equality. Mad bhaktim labate param. That's when pure devotional service begins, or until then it's devotional service in practice. But these are standards by which we can know how we're doing. Despite calamity, prasanatma. Neither hankering or lamenting, treating other living entities equally. I was visiting one family, and a young boy, maybe 10 years old. I didn't even have to ask him what did he want to be when he grew up. He volunteered. What I want to be when I grow up is he wants to take care of animals that are wounded. And then his mom, spoke up and said he found a rabbit that couldn't even hop, and he took the rabbit in and took care of the rabbit and took it to a veterinarian, and then the rabbit was hopping along, and my son was really happy. And there's so many living entities. Of course, I don't know what he's going to be when he grows up, but that's how he was thinking. It's a compassionate mood. His light's on, this young boy. He sees the world and sees a lot of suffering and wants to do something about it. He's just 10 years old, but it may change, who knows. But when there's difficulty, there's abundant difficulty in this world. So something limited and temporary is help the bunny rabbit be able to jump again. But then what about the soul that's got in the bunny rabbit body, or is in the cycle of birth and death? And what about that? But he has a devotional spirit. He loves kirtan, and so he likes reading Bhagavad. So he'll grow with that compassionate mood in him, and a Krishna conscious message, and may that Brahmabhuta stage come for him. And how well that comes is a way to evaluate how we're doing in the process of devotional service. And this is the last slide, next. Our fail-safe position with the beginning, the middle, and end is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. The image is meant to show in the left side, there's someone moving through a forest of uncertainty called life. That's how I think of life. Who knows what's next? There's some light coming in, and there's some shadows going on, and we're moving along because we don't know what's next. And you have an idea of where we want to go, and something else happens than what we were thinking. That's often the way it is. And how resilient are we? And what's our shelter? That's the real test. If there's, like your son, who likes chanting, That's a place of shelter. He's going for his bead bag. Does someone have to train you like that, or you just have a natural liking for chanting? He's shy. What do the parents say?
Depends on the time.
Ah, I see. Okay. Sometimes, yes, okay. So may that attraction that you have for chanting stay with you permanently for your whole life. May Krishna bless you like that. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. Let's go back to the starting slide. I can do it just by touch. Evaluating one's standing and absorption in Krishna consciousness. I thought it was a nice topic. Yes. In the back, you have a portable microphone. All the way back.
Thank you, Maharaj. You mentioned those 7 stages of unsteady devotional service. And you said it's sequential from Madhurya Kadambini.
Yes.
I was just wondering if everybody goes through the same stages?
Yes. I mean, one may stay longer or shorter, but we pass through. That's my understanding. Mm-hmm. And it's not like this one's done and now you're in this bucket and you're out of that bucket and you're in the next bucket. But it is stages. Sequential. And
once you're out of the 7th stage, then you'll be steady?
Well, the unsteadiness diminishes. I mean, what I didn't present is he has a little chart where the causes of unsteadiness, the mist of ignorance and the clouds of anarthas are the cause of unsteadiness, the unsteady bhakti, until it becomes shuddha. And it becomes shuddha, completely pure at the prema stage, which means there's some residual effects up until then. At least influences, if not displays, of that unsteadiness.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Where'd that come from? Devaprastha, that's your creation?
No.
You carried it. Where'd you get the artwork? Did you have it printed and it's online?
It's online. I saw it behind His Holiness Bhakti-Rasamrita Swami was giving a talk on Zoom, and behind him on the wall was this, and one of the students who used to be in the club has a relationship with him, and so I sent him this photo. I said, what is this photo? And 5 minutes later, he sent me the PDF.
Send me a copy.
Okay, I will.
That's nice. Look at the flower at the top. Nice. So those of you that found the topic meaningful can get a PDF too and study, and get the book, Madhurya Kadambini. There's different translations of the book. But, it's just more detailed than I presented. I presented only kind of very quickly summary highlights. So, yeah.
So to tack on to Rashi's question, the unsteadiness, you mentioned it goes away when one reaches prema. So then is this nishta is steadiness?
Yeah.
So is that this nishta on this chart related to the unsteadiness that you just discussed? Are those
No.
Those are different?
It's different.
Different things.
It's different. At least my understanding of her question was, when is it like squeaky clean? Gone. Not when it's... Oh, you were referring to Nishta. Oh, no, the Nishta stage, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Nishta stage is where the anarthas still exist, but minimal, and the bhakti has become strong enough that the minimal doesn't manifest. That's Nishta, but it's still there. The verse from the Bhagavatam, Nashta, Prayeshu Abhadreshu. Prayeshu means almost nil. Prayeshu. Like Prayena Pradyushakshabhya Kalavasmin Yugejana. It's a very small amount. So it's such a small amount, and the bhakti is sufficiently strong, it just doesn't manifest. Generally speaking. It may, but generally speaking. But I thought your question was, when is it like squeaky clean? So that's the prema stage. I didn't understand your question properly. Thank you for catching that.
The 7 stages are in the
Yes, yes, yes. The distinction from the Sanskrit is unsteady and steady, anishtata and nishtha. Unsteady, nishtha. But after nishtha comes 4 more stages. After steadiness comes 4 more stages. Ruchi, Sakti, Bhava, Prema. And so the analysis is there's still some remaining or residual anarthas loitering in the heart. One doesn't experience the full brightness of bhakti or until the prema stage is there. When the prema stage is there, anarthas are completely eradicated. In the nishta stage, they're still there, lingering. And there can be a relapse from that nishta stage if one slackens. Yeah.
So Maharaj, you spoke about, when we chant, then we clear the anarthas from the heart. And sometimes it seems like, you are putting the effort and you are getting the results.
You are not getting the result.
Well, first, sometimes it does
Effort,
feel
yes,
like
and
you...
result, no?
Right. So at sometimes it feels like you are
Okay.
putting the effort and you're not getting the results that you were used to before. It seems that the same amount of intention and effort is going in, but the reward, so to speak, is not the same as it used to be before, not even necessarily in the first 2 years of bhakti, but just at an earlier time. So is that a case of insincerity? Is that a case of a difficult time? Is that a case of the mind lacking behind the resolve of the intelligence? What is going on there?
Okay. Are you the one that requested this topic?
My wife did.
And you have some further questions on this topic? Okay. You're letting everyone else get theirs out first. Okay. Just checking. I want to make sure I got the terrain sorted out. It can be a number of things and different things at different times. So it's not necessarily this or that or another thing or a combination. It can be any one of those and then change and then change. So what to do? I mean, it's good to know what the cause is, but supposing like your question is, I'm not sure what the cause is. One of the things that will help you identify the cause is continuing to make your best effort, increasing the association of those who are very capable and qualified in the matter of chanting, and be vigilant. 3 things. Continue, it's 4 things. Continue, persevere in the effort, with enthusiasm. And then you'll if you are attempting to do that, you'll notice enthusiasm is waning. And where does the attention go when the enthusiasm is waning? You don't need to answer me right now. It's just something that you can do to check yourself. What are the things that your enthusiasm gets drained by? Where does your attention go? And that'll help you understand what the cause is. The association of, consistently enthusiastic chanters or devotees, reading the scripture regularly in a qualitative way, specifically a qualitative way, is how does this move my heart? How is this going to help me get closer to Krishna? If you read with that intention, then you'll understand better about what the cause is of not getting the result. Say the opposite. If it stays on the information platform and not goes to the heart platform, then the feeling closer to Krishna as a result of chanting is going to take a long time. Say it positively. By reading with the intention that I want this to nourish my attraction for Krishna and my access from the heart level to Krishna, then you'll get a better understanding of what the cause is that the getting closer to Krishna is not happening. Because there's some areas that you'll feel like really invigorated by and it stays. In some areas you don't feel as invigorated by, or a little invigorated, and then it fades again. You just have to be vigilant. Vigilant to what? Vigilant to your relationship with Krishna. It has everything to do with this indifference towards Krishna. That I'm convinced of.
So may I ask a follow-up, Maharaj?
Sure.
So if I become aware of certain things in devotional service I'm not enthusiastic about, then should I focus more on those particular things?
Well, you do 2 things. You do those things that you are enlivened by more vigorously. And then in that more enlivened state, you borrow from that enlivenment and apply it to the other, where it's not so strong. And I would say a third comment is be very careful to not go after the area that's not so strong in a doership mentality, but in a service mentality. And you know what that means. So I have observed that when devotees get some insight, either from hearing from others or their own realization, the very first thing that happens is the doership mode. And they just get absorbed in doing, and they again feel disconnected with Super Soul or their mentor or their spiritual master or Prabhupada or, his teachings, and they get into the doership mode. And, then before they know it, they're back into that same space again. Like, what happened? My experience is a big factor is the doership mode. It's, it's what we're accustomed to, the mode of passion. That's where we are. Bhuloka, the place of passion. We just get into the doership mode and it slips through our fingers. The wisdom is gone. It was knowledge, but not wisdom.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Okay. Your wife is next.
Thank you, Maharaj, for this very nice talk. My question is regarding bhajan kriya and anartha nivritti. I've heard that those are like the stages where you spend a long time
Yes.
in, but sometimes it seems very painful.
Painful.
And
Yeah.
it seems that it's going to be, it almost seems like it's going to be many lifetimes in those two stages. So how does one uplift oneself? Because that the thought that you're going to just be scrubbing through for a long time, just it sometimes seems a little discouraging.
But painful is not the same as discouraging.
Yeah.
So I'm recommending to you personally that language is important. A phrase that I use a lot, borrowed from Sachinandan Swami, by the way, is liminal space. Have you heard any of his lectures?
A few.
A few. He uses it from time to time, and I really like it because, like, what's that? Liminal space. So I've made it a point to understand what it means, because for him it's important, and it's a transition from this to that. Like, for example, two examples. When some people have a porch in front of their house, in architectural terms, that's called the liminal space. It's neither in the house or out in the yard. It's neither here nor there, or patio, or something like that. Or another is in the doorway. Probably, I didn't notice, but you probably in your front door, there's the outside, there's the inside, and there's this board that goes underneath the main door of the home, and it's called a limen. It's a transition between this and that. So liminal space, I use the word as uncomfortable. You can say painful, and you can say discouraging. But if you're clear what the goal is, this is something I heard Prabhupada say many times, so many times that, like, this is important. What does he mean when he says, when you clearly define a goal, it's very easy to take steps to get there. Then conversely, if the goal is not well defined, it's very difficult to make steps to get there. So if the goal is well defined, and you're over here and you want to get over there, and you have to pass through this liminal space that's uncomfortable or painful, or, in life, like teenage life, for example. Or, this couple that they're going to move. And so, or they've moved a couple of times. And when you move from one place to another place, how long have you been in this house? A year? So moving from where you were to this house, that transitions are uncomfortable. I mean, you have a reason for doing it, so that keeps you going. But when there's transition, it's uncomfortable, at least. And you're looking forward to the new situation, but the transition is uncomfortable. It's just the nature of getting to where you want to go. So get used to it. It's uncomfortable, and it's quite okay. It's the fact that it's uncomfortable is good, because it shows you're making progress. You're not just in a comfort zone. You're moving towards something. And the more you understand what that something is, and the value of that something, the more you have enthusiasm to get there. Or at least a yearning to get there, if not enthusiasm. So a cute little phrase, it's say yes to the holy name. Y is yearning, E is enthusiasm, and S is spontaneous. I'm not in the spontaneous devotion platform yet. I may be just in this yearning stage, and even the yearning is kind of, not as strong as it could be, should be, would be. And it's not, not at the enthusiasm stage yet. Or it was enthusiastic a while ago, but now I'm not feeling enthusiastic anymore. And that's the sine curve. the unsteady bhakti thing. And what are the symptoms and the causes? And those are important questions to ask. And so what to do? However many lifetimes. That's what I do. And I want to be enthusiastic. Because if you're not enthusiastic, you won't achieve anything. But it's not in the doership enthusiasm. It's the effort and mercy lifestyle. And I have trust in Krishna. I trust in the bhakti process to connect with Krishna. And it's a rough ride because it's a transition for me. Because I like that comfort zone back there. Not really, but I'm accustomed to it at least. And I'm not there yet space.
It's very helpful.
So there's an acceptance and progress. And progress, good association, good practices, define the goal, redefine the goal, call out from your heart, and don't be complacent. Keep striving. Learn to strive better tomorrow than you did today, and etc. Then it'll take less time. It's certainly possible. It's certainly possible. It's designed to take place in this one lifetime. It's certainly possible it can take longer, but it's certainly possible it can be in one lifetime. And we have, you have to align things properly. Take shelter of the mercy that's descending and be eager for it. What's that? What's the option? What's the other option? The other option is not very attractive. Struggle. Feel discouraged. That's not attractive. So what's the better option? Okay, let me do what I need to do to take that choice on the menu. If there's some effort, then I'm going to make effort.
Thank you, Maharaj. I have one more.
I'm sure you do. It's your topic.
Could you comment on self-reflection? Like, how should one reflect on a daily basis? Like, some devotees recommend journaling.
Yes, that's one option.
And is when you're reflecting, like, my mind tends to go towards the negatives, so I tend to think of my negatives. Like, what should reflection comprise of? Should it be a balance between
Yes.
positive and...
I mean, it's like if you're giving feedback to your son, you don't just focus on the negative. That's not going to be very productive. So you treat yourself like you treat your son. What's positive? And it's like it's not the same, but similar to the question your husband asked about where I see that there's some weakness. Do I just spend a lot of time and energy on that weakness? Spend time and energy on where your strengths are, and then borrow from that strength and send some over there. You don't neglect it. You don't tuck it under the rug, and you don't obsess about it either. Take energy where you receive it, and then just distribute it. But in all the, as I said to your husband, be very clear that the purpose is pleasing Krishna. The purpose is not, let me get out of here. It's not a liberationist, salvationist kind of a idea. That's not, it doesn't endure. It's not wholesome. It's not bhakti. It's not pure bhakti. So we're used to the other one. We're used to what's in it for me consciousness. And we have to move, at least cultivate the attitude that Just as the screen shows, absorption in Krishna consciousness. So this is the evaluation of one's standing by your question, your tendency to dwell on the negative. So recognizing that tendency, you take some corrective measures. When self-evaluating, what's the strength? And you get energy, and you can deal with those things that are tendencies that are weaknesses much more effectively. And in good times and in hard times. Do things that you really like. Do them well. Celebrate. And spend time on things, as you need to, spend time on things that need improvement, etc. Otherwise, it's really easy to get lost in the temporary. And the negative is not who you are anyways. So cultivate who you are and where you want to be. And that gives strength and light and clarity to go to work, take care of the things that are unwanted things. Anyone else in the room wants to contribute to this discussion?
Thank you, Maharaj, for a very nice class. Just a question on chanting. I've heard that there are few P's to chanting, like preparation, posture, and prayerful mood. I was wondering, how can I prepare for a very high quality and absorbed chanting?
How can you prepare for it?
Yeah.
Be ready for some liminal space. Be ready that it's not going to happen quickly enough. So don't be so result oriented. There's Burijan, Burijan Prabhu, wrote a nice essay on something to the effect of not aspiring for high experiences when chanting. Prematrangani, you have that essay, right? Huh? No, not that one. It's some advice, because he's led japa retreats many times, not aspiring for high moments in chanting. Peak experiences, there we go. So it's an advice. Don't aspire for that. So if you don't aspire for that, what do you aspire for? And if you prepare for what? Because you have to have a goal. The goal is your relationship with Krishna. And in a relationship with Krishna, I want to be connected. I want to feel connected to Krishna. Like this question over here, sometimes I feel less connected than I used to. So what to do? Why and what to do? So prepare yourself to be connected, to be in the mood of service to the name. That's Rupa Goswami's teaching, by the way. The verse, the Takshri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Grayam Indriya Sevan Mukhi Hi Jivado Sevan Mukhi Hi Jivado. So be in the mood of service to the name, and the experience will follow. And the experience is whatever the experience is. That is to say, we're not dictating to Krishna that we want X, Y, or Z experience. We want to be in service, and then Krishna will lift you. He knows what we need better than we know. It's not just we need peak experiences, we need a relationship with Krishna. So that's my advice. Read that verse and try to understand how it applies to you and to all of us, and enter into that mood. Sevan mukhi hi jivada swayameva sparachyada. It's a nice verse.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. One more question.
Sure.
During the day, we have very less time for sadhana, but whatever time we have, should we, I was thinking, should we go beyond the 16 rounds Srila Prabhupada recommended, or should we do more reading and hearing of kathas?
What moves your heart, do more of that.
Thank you, Maharaj. much.
And supposing somebody just likes reading and doesn't like chanting, or just likes chanting and doesn't like reading. Follow your heart means I don't chant or I don't read. But some, because it's instruction of our founder Acharya and all those who are following him, so we do some of both. But when you have discretionary time, it can be. Here's a practical example or a model. On Ekadasis, increase chanting. And other days, when you have discretionary time, increase reading. Doesn't mean you can't increase reading on Ekadasis, but when there's those special holidays, make a plan and increase. So it's a regulated increase. And then as that regulated increase happens on a regular basis, you're set. You can increase or whatever you want to do. Something else. Someone else had their hand up. Yes, over here. Yes.
So you mentioned those 30 qualities of civilized human beings from Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
And you said that we should strive to attain those.
Not exactly what I said, but go ahead.
I mean, I was just wondering, what's the process of attaining them then? Is it just like our sadhana?
The process is Krishna decorates. He has a big warehouse, a good quality warehouse, and he can decorate his devotees with good qualities. So we're dependent upon Krishna for those good qualities. So we cultivate them, but we're not going to be able to do it unless Krishna is kind and he decorates. So it's a team effort, you could say. It's a bhakti effort. Krishna helps. Does that answer?
So there's no need of like trying to cultivate them separate?
We consciously cultivate. My point is, don't be in the doership mode. Let's just say, kindness or charity. So you be charitable. But behavior is one thing and equality is another thing. We want the quality, not just the behavior. So that comes from Krishna. But we cultivate the behavior. Truthfulness. So you can control your tongue and not speak crooked. But deeper is at the heart level, and that's your relationship with Krishna. So you're depending all the while in developing these 30. It's a number of the 30, by the way, they're processes of bhakti. 9 of them are processes of bhakti. 21 or something else. Okay.
Thank you.
Deva Prasta, you have something? Yes.
I didn't raise my hand.
Well, I thought you did raise your hand before she raised hers. After she raised hers.
So this topic of doership and servitorship, you mentioned a few times in different contexts.
Yes.
So it's dawning on my dull brain that it's kind of a background principle that applies to everything.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure I understand. So whether it's criticizing devotees or controlling the tongue or developing charity, developing a good quality or undeveloping a bad quality, it's the same mood. I can do the thing, but that's not enough. I need to, my reason for doing this thing is to bring pleasure to Krishna.
Yes, the intention.
And that's what we want to focus on, not doing the thing.
Yes. Yes, you got it.
Develop that intention. Krishna, nice, I want to please you by not doing this or doing this.
That's the bhakti principle that makes character durable or sustainable or a reality, not a come and go kind of thing, the unstable. This topic is discussed in a different way in Uddhava Gita. I've been spending time with Uddhava Gita in morning classes. And it's very interesting. Krishna says that the vidya and avidya potencies are both from Maya Shakti. There's another that's from the internal potency, Krishna's internal potency, but that which the avidya, which covers the living entity, and the vidya Shakti that liberates the living entity, that's all Maya Shakti. It's a designation. Huh? Sounds like double talk. But when you're engaged in bhakti, then there's an internal, of which the Maya Shakti is a reflection only. The knowledge that accrues to one who cultivates Gyan and tries to develop qualities of goodness to cultivate Gyan. So it's the Maya Shakti. And after some time, the bungee cord goes back again. Because the tendency to want to be the independent enjoyer is still there, underlying the whole thing. The antidote is the wanting to please Krishna. Anushilana. Anukulyena. Krishna Anushilana.
And I think you said in answer to Rashmi's that whether we're trying to get rid of a quality or increase the quality, the result, the character, the quality, when that is achieved or accomplished or removed, that's Krishna. That's that's not us.
Yes.
He, due to our sincere desire to please him in this way, whatever the specific is, when he's satisfied, then we get rid of that thing or we increase that quality. That's that we can't control.
That's right.
Actually developing that quality or getting rid of the anartha. We just control the desire, the effort and the desire. And then he says, okay, yes, you want more of that, I'll give you more of that. Or you want to get rid of that, I'll take that away.
But mode of goodness people, Krishna reciprocates with mode of goodness people too. Mode of goodness meaning when the bhakti principle is, at best, it's weak. But mode of goodness, Krishna reciprocates with the mode of goodness people. Krishna reciprocates with the mode of ignorance people. Somebody wants to become a thief and he gives them the intelligence to become a thief. And the mode of goodness person, how to have good qualities. They want to be good. And somewhere in that picture is, God for mode of goodness people. But wanting to be with a servant of God, that's the principle. And then it's durable. It's not up and down. And take that same principle, by the way, and in Lord Chaitanya's teachings, to enter into Krishna's eternal realm, Krishna's eternal associates have to award one the spiritual form to take part in Krishna's pastimes. It's a descending. No, there has to be an aspiration, a hankering, say it stronger, eagerness, say it stronger, greed. But that's Lord Chaitanya's teachings. As it applies in those higher stages, the same principle applies in our sadhana stage. There's effort and mercy. It's not just effort. And it's not just mercy. It's effort and mercy. And the effort may be tested. Your effort may be tested. But it's not that Krishna's checking you out or that he doesn't already know or something. Like he's not omniscient. He's omniscient. But he's, helping you to become stronger by not getting the results so quickly because you made a nice effort. And you can whine it like a child, oh, you didn't give me the effort. I've made the effort. You didn't give me the result. He wants our effort to become strengthened. That may be his purpose. So let me make that effort strengthened. Let me become enthusiastic. Let me become greedy. Oh, doesn't sound nice, but spiritually it's nice. And that's our bhakti process. That's what Lord Chaitanya gave us. That's our teaching. And he's kind. And he wants us to come. And we got our hooks and attachments over here. That's the bungee cord.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful answer, and thank you for giving so much of your valuable time.
I enjoy giving valuable time especially with audiences that want to go, have a question like this. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah.